Retro.
Welcome back to Iconic Sonics. My name is Danny Ball. As always, I'll be your host. Jason Quick is here. We've got an interview with him coming up. He covered the Blazers for over 2 decades down in Portland. And on that note, we've got some breaking news. It's Wednesday, August 13th at about 10 a.m. And we just found out that the Portland Trail Blazers have officially sold for $4 billion. We get into that talk with Jason in this interview a little bit, but some details on the sale. Tom Dundon, I believe, I haven't heard anybody say his name, so I hope I'm saying that right, has just bought the Blazers for, like I said, that $4 billion price tag. Obviously, one of the concerns coming out of Portland was the rhetoric that sounded eerily similar to the talks that were going on in Seattle before the Sonics left. Adam Silver at the last Board of Governors press conference had talked about how the Moda Center needed updating so that it could stay up to par with the rest of the arenas in the NBA. Obviously, Sonics fans know that issue all too well, and with the team for sale, some real concerns about the Trailblazers leaving Portland started to arise. However, after the sale this morning was announced, it very quickly came out that Tom Dundon, who also owns the Carolina Hurricanes in the NHL, when he took over that team, they were also a candidate for relocation. Tom is born in New York, he's raised in Texas, and he locked down a 20-year lease to keep the team in Raleigh. So if that is a sign of anything to come, the Trailblazers fans should be excited. It seems like with that information that Dundon will probably keep the team there. Like I said, we get into that conversation with Jason Quick here in a little bit. Before we do that, I want to give a few shout-outs. I want to start by saying that the NBA offseason in Seattle, since we don't have the Sonics anymore, is really our regular season. I've been extremely busy running around to different camps, to different events, to Storm games, and I just want people that tune into this to know that Seattle basketball is still alive and well. We may not have our Sonics, and we obviously are pushing hard to get them back, but we truly do have so much talent that comes out of Seattle, and we do have such a talented WNBA team. I want to give a big shout out to Rise Above and congratulate them on 10 years of success. Their work with Native youth is nothing short of amazing. Jackie McCormick over there is truly an inspiration, and it was great to get to celebrate them. I got to meet Common and hear him talk about bringing the Sonics back, as well as his love for the game and how it's translated into his love for music and everything else that he does. Seeing Garfield High filled with a bunch of young hoopers and Brandon Roy coaching them up, as well as Carla McGee and Ruthie Bolton being there, 2 WNBA legends that were on the original Dream Team on the women's side of things. It was really just a special weekend in Seattle, and I know that the freestyle that Common spit at the end of the Rise Above camp will be a memory that not only me, but probably all of those campers will take with them for the rest of their life. We also had Zeekend down in Tacoma a couple weekends ago. That was another decade-long celebration. Isaiah Thomas announced it will be the last tournament that he's hosting down there, but it's always a great time. The turnout was awesome, and it's a great way to keep the spirit of the Sonics alive in my mind. We also, on our own side of things, had our trivia night over in Ballard with Desmond Mason. Shout out to Slim Goody for putting us up. We had a great time over there. They've got a heck of a bar and a heck of a setup, and we'll definitely be running that back sometime soon, so be sure to keep a lookout on our Instagram at iconic_sonics. And we also made it up to Swinomish Casino and Lodge. It was my first time up there. It was a great time. I went up with Dez. We had a meet and greet. We met a bunch of Sonics fans that are in the even more top left of Washington State than Seattle. And the stories that people were telling about going to games, the amount of merch that they had, the love that they had for Dez was just great to see. And it's a reminder that the Sonics really were a part of the fabric of the NBA. That's what Common had said to me when I met him. And it's true. They have so much history beyond even just the championship in 79 and the finals appearance in 96. They're just so entwined. And so continuing to wrap our head around how long it might take to get them back is tough, but I cannot reiterate how much I appreciate the stories and the knowledge and the laughs that are shared about the Sonics. It really, really does mean the world to me. Like I said, the NBA offseason might as well be Seattle's regular season. We've got even Paolo Banchero's hosting his elite camp for the first time in Seattle this summer, so we'll have a bunch of the top high school talent training with him this weekend. So truly just want to give a shout out to everybody here in the Seattle area doing their part, sharing their stories with me, showing up, and just keeping the spirit of the Sonics alive. That's enough for me. You've heard me ramble on long enough. We've got a great interview with Jason Quick, so let's get right into that. All right, I'm here with Jason Quick, senior writer at The Athletic. He's been down in Portland covering the Blazers and the NBA as a whole. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Danny. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, we're happy to have you. Give our audience a little bit of background, what you have been covering and just kind of your time in Portland and what you've done with your career as an NBA writer and what you've seen and where you're at now.
Oh, boy. Well, I started covering the Blazers in 98 and was really thrown into the fire. That was a rough group with Rasheed Wallace, Bonzi Wells, Stacey Augmon. But I covered them for, almost, more than 25 years. In the last 3 years, I've kind of branched away from them and am focusing more on features and human interest stories around the NBA. And I've really enjoyed that. It's just, doing a beat of the same team for so long can get stale. And I just wanted to kind of expand my horizons a little bit and test myself and go into some unfamiliar territory and talk to people I didn't really know. And really, towards the end of my career here, I've gravitated toward the human element of sports more so than the day-to-day grind of an NBA season. So that's where I'm at.
One of my memories of that Rasheed Wallace team is that I believe it's a Lakers playoff series where he was just staring at, I want to say it's Zach Zarba, but I can't remember the referee.
Ronnie Garrettson.
There you go. Ronnie Garrettson. Yeah, correct. And my friends and I to this day still quote, "Whack, get out." That's one of my what other memories do you have that you can kind of share about that team and when you first got in there of the early Portland days?
Well, Rasheed and I nearly got in a fight in San Antonio.
Okay, that sounds like a good story.
It was the first game that the Blazers had played against San Antonio since Steve Smith had been traded. Steve Smith had been traded in the summer from Portland to San Antonio. So after the game, Steve Smith came in the locker room to say hi to all the fellas. And I was standing by Rasheed's locker. And for those who don't know, Rasheed famously would not talk to the media. And so Smith comes by and goes, "Still trying to get Rasheed to give you a quote, huh, Quick?" And I said, I made some comment. It wasn't inflammatory or anything. And Rasheed flipped around, threw his towel, and said, "Why would I talk to you cats when all you do is bag on us and blah, blah, blah?" And he got right in my face. And Rick Brunson got in between us. It was Rick Brunson and Steve Kerr. And they pushed me out of the locker room. They're like, "Dude, this is not worth it. It's not worth it." And the next game, Rick Brunson came up to me and said, "Dude, I had to do that because you have no idea what that guy's going to do." And, he throw a punch or whatever. So that was pretty intense.
Yeah, for sure. I can't even imagine getting pushed out of the locker room by Rick Brunson and Steve Kerr. That is quite the story there. A few of those names that you just threw around, Steve Smith was up here for Lenny Wilkens' statue ceremony back in June. And as well as Rick Brunson, he had a cup of coffee up here with the Sonics for a little bit. There's a lot of crossover between even Nate McMillan coaching up here and coaching down in Portland. Can you kind of talk about that connection between the Sonics and the Blazers that we used to have and just kind of what those teams meant to you and what their relationship kind of looked like to you in your eyes?
Yeah, it was a great rivalry. And I think from both sides, people got up for those games. And there were just some really memorable games. I remember Terry Porter having some huge games in Seattle. I wish I knew more details. I remember he hit something like 8 threes or something in the game, but I just thought the electricity for those meetings was something very unique, even more than a Blazer-Laker series. And I think everyone would consider the Lakers the Blazers' #1 rival, but that's only because the Sonics left. I think the Sonics Blazers were special, and Yeah, I missed that. I really, really missed that.
Yeah, I think a lot of our fans do as well. We were talking before we jumped on that we just had a quick chat with Brandon Roy. He was sharing a memory about his NBA debut in Seattle as not only a
Yeah,
Garf. He got booed. He got booed in Seattle. I was shocked to find that out, but had some friends that were at the game that confirmed the memory that he shared with us.
it was overwhelming, but there were definite boos. Yeah, I mean, Seattle's a hotbed of talent and NBA talent, and I think, Jamal deserves a lot of credit for keeping his pro-am going and, keeping the talent rolling through there. He's been just a huge ambassador for the game and for Seattle. Um, but, I think one thing that sticks with me, I did a story last year on Seattle and kind of the temperature of them wanting people back, and I talked to Brent Barry, and he said what really bothers him about the Sonics leaving Seattle is there's a whole generation of kids who aren't able to go and say, "I saw LeBron James, one of the greatest players ever play." I never got to see him play live because there's no longer a team here, and that's what I think about is, um, you know, I know when I grew up as a kid loving a team and, you know, and going to games, watching games on TV and how much that impacted my life and, my social life, my dreams, my aspirations, and I think that's what really hurts when you think about Seattle losing a team is that void for so many youths growing up, the connections that are formed, the desires to be on a team and the team building skills you get by being on a youth team, and looking up to someone, having someone to emulate. All that is gone because they weren't able to keep the team.
But it could be this year, and it'll probably definitely be next year if it's not this year, depending on how old the number one draft pick is in the draft. But we're about to turn a corner where there's going to be an 18 or 19-year-old kid coming into the league that wasn't around when the Sonics were even a thing, which is crazy to wrap our head around. On that note, and on them leaving, we heard some similar rhetoric from Adam Silver this Board of Governors meeting down in July that sounded very similar to the beginning of the end here in Seattle about needing to redo a stadium down in Portland. Can you kind of talk to what the response was in Portland? Obviously, I saw some of it. We are friends with some Blazers fan pages on Instagram, and so we saw their response. But can you kind of just talk to having boots on the ground and kind of hearing after Adam said that what the thoughts and feelings were in Portland?
Well, I think everyone's knee-jerk reaction is to think the worst, right? And to think, "Oh my god, could a new owner relocate the Blazers?" I think that's just human nature, and especially after what happened to Seattle, people have that just inherent fear that the worst can happen. Um, I don't think it will. I think there's a very small chance it will, and I say that because there's a bunch of little provisions, put in, First, the Blazers are under lease until 2030 to play at the, Moda Center, and then also they've put in the bridge agreement, to my knowledge, has put in a bunch of little provisions that, will make it, uh difficult or hard for a new owner to move the team. Like, if they do move the team, then they have to give back all the taxes and revenue brought in by the parking and all that, so there's a bunch of little deterrents put in there to keep the team, uh, in Portland. And I do think too that the NBA saw something about what happened to Seattle and the deep feelings uh, that have lingered, and I think they want to avoid that again. And I think Portland has a similar connection and tie to its team as Seattle did, and I think it would have the same devastating, gut wrenching effects. So I think the NBA, if they really um, were honest, would like to avoid that. And then also I think nobody knows what the verbiage was in Paul's uh, agreement or his instructions uh, for the sale of the team, but it's sounding more and more like their word was, or there are direct uh, uh, directions to keep the team in Portland. I think that was his desire. He didn't want it to go anywhere else. He wants to keep it in Portland. So I really think it's going to stay in Portland.
That's positive to hear. I think I posted what Bill Simmons had said about the Pelicans relocating, and we got a lot of mixed emotions. It was probably a 60-40 split between people saying bring them back, no matter how you can bring them back. Basketball back in Seattle would be great, and it's been so long that I don't care how we get it. And then the other side of it was we don't want to do what Oklahoma City essentially, kind of did to us. And so it was interesting to kind of see that response. Outside of Portland, obviously that the team of the Pelicans gets thrown around a decent amount. Sometimes even the Grizzlies get thrown in there. I've had some conversations with former players talking about how they felt about Memphis and kind of reiterating some of those feelings that we've started to hear about guys maybe not feeling safe there. What can you kind of speak to relocation as a whole in the NBA? Do you think that that's something that they look at and use? As you were just saying, I feel like sometimes they use Seattle almost as the example of this is how poorly it can go, but I feel like they also use the Sonics and the possible moving of a team back to Seattle as kind of the boogeyman of, hey, make sure you have your arena up to standards and make sure you're not tanking all the time, and make sure you have a fan base, or you watch out, we'll move you guys to Seattle. What are your kind of feelings just generally about relocation?
Well, I think there's two different scenarios there. You're talking about an owner buying a team and relocating it like Clay Bennett did. That is horrid, and I don't think that serves anybody well. The other scenario is a team struggling and, like New Orleans, Memphis, they're not those arenas are half empty on the majority of their games, and they're struggling. Now that is a different scenario. I think when a city can't support a team or doesn't support a team, then it's different to relocate. But when a team is beloved by its community and supported and then moved, that's bad business, I think. So, in the case of New Orleans and Memphis, I don't, I'm not into threats. I don't think the NBA is putting threats out there, but I think they have to take that seriously. That, hey, do we want to support this, or face the consequences of potentially losing it?
Similar genre of question, but I think more kind of towards expansion. One thing that I've been thinking about since that meeting down in July is that if there was 27 owners that were ready to expand, I think especially with what we're seeing the league do with Europe, they're interested in new markets. I don't think that the league, I guess I shouldn't say that blankly. I think they did slow walk expansion so they could get the CBA done and the media rights done. But in my mind, if there was 27 owners or 26 owners that were ready to expand, I think the rhetoric that came out of there of today is day one or whatever Adam's direct quote was might have been different, and there might have been a little bit more excitement about that. Do you kind of agree with that, or do you think that it's more on both sides, or do you think it's just kind of the owners slowing things down?
Yeah, I don't have a good read on that, but all I know is I expected expansion to be further along on their timeline. I think everyone did, right?
Yeah,
I think
totally.
I think it's been a letdown, especially for the people in Seattle. And I was really surprised to hear. I think the emphasis on Europe has leapfrogged the expansion here domestically, and that's disappointing. But I get it. Their job is to make money, and I think there's an untapped market there in Europe. But certainly, I think it's disappointing to for how long? What, it's been 16 years?
17 as of July 2nd.
Yeah, 17 years. I never thought it would have taken this long. Um, and now it looks like we're gonna have to wait. I mean, at least another year, perhaps two. Uh, and that's just disappointing. I don't know if it's the owners wanting a bigger cut of the media pie, or the new television deal, or if it's just Adam kind of driving this narrative of we want to expand internationally. But either way, it's a bummer for Seattle.
Definitely, definitely. I think the thing that I always think about, especially with Portland in mind, is that the rivalry we were talking about earlier, and also just how close these teams are. I'd like to try to get down to at least a couple Blazers games a year. If we were gonna project into the future and those Sonics did come back, what do you kind of think that looks like? What do you think the reception would be down in Portland of the Sonics coming back? And I know we were talking about that rivalry earlier. It sounds like you would love to see them back in town, but do you think that's the kind of general feeling in Portland?
I think in the NBA, everyone loved the Sonics. I mean, they dope uniforms. The arena experience was awesome, right down to Squatch. I mean, one of the best mascots. Uh, and just, I think it would do so much. Climate Pledge Arena now is a bomb arena. I mean, they did an amazing job with that. I think the entire league would celebrate the Sonics coming back. And one of the things when I did that story last year about the Sonics expansion and stuff and what it means to Seattle, I think the thing that separates the Seattle situation from any other situation is how the connection that the players felt to the city, and how much these former players are campaigning on behalf of the Sonics returning. That is so rare. I mean, you look at Kansas City, San Diego, Buffalo, all the teams that have lost their teams. You don't see former players going, you need to get a team back there. But we got George Karl, Sean Kemp, Dale Ellis. I mean, everyone.
Common was in town this week. I got Common saying bring back the Sonics and that they're part of the fabric of the NBA. So yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you there
So
for
so
sure.
I think the excitement will expands beyond Seattle, Portland, the Northwest. I think it'd be NBA wide, and I think you would see Sonic jerseys everywhere.
And we still do, which I think is exactly to your point. Not just in Seattle, even Max Crosby came down here to play the Seahawks for their preseason game. He was in a Kevin Durant jersey.
That's
We
dope.
still see it all the time. Dialing it back from a future narrative into the present day timeline, the Blazers did make some waves this offseason. DeAndre Ayton out, Damian Lillard back in, Drew Holiday back in the Pacific Northwest. What can you tell us about what you're expecting for this season, and just kind of what your hopes are for the Blazers in these next few years to come?
Well, it's certainly an intriguing group. I'm not so sure their offseason was smart, but it's certainly intriguing. Look, they've got a nice little young core. I mean, Denny Avdia is, I think, about a borderline all-star now. Tumani Kamara, great defender. I think he'll be first team all defensive. Uh, eh, and they got this young new center that they drafted, Young Hansen.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Everyone kind of uh, chastised and laughed at the pick because he was projected as a second rounder. They took him 16, but Joe Cronin's looking pretty dang smart right now because that kid has some talent. He can move, 7'2" center, passes really well, has great court vision. It looks like it was a uh, calculated move and a calculated risk, or calculated gamble, I should say. Uh, but that being said, I, people here in Portland I think they're really anticipating this season. I think I think people think the Blazers are better than they are, because last season they finished really well, but it was kind of fool's gold. They played a bunch of tanking teams who who really pulled the plug during the game. I mean, they were losing to Toronto, losing to Washington, and then they took out all their starters, and the Blazers won those games. So there's a bunch of incidences like that. Other teams didn't play their stars a lot down the stretch. So I think the Blazers' final record was a little bit of fool's gold, and I still think they have some big questions. I don't know if we know yet if Scoot is going to be their starting point guard, and I think the addition of Drew Holiday, why I think he's a fabulous player, I think his skills diminished a little bit last year, in part because of injury. But also, I think his arrival, I don't understand how it benefits Scoot and Shaden, because he's going to take away some time from one of those guys. Um, and why I'm all for having wily veterans, uh, solid veterans, and Drew is certainly that. I think he could be a great mentor, but I think this is a time where they need to figure out on Scoot, is he our point guard of the future or not? And I don't know. I don't know if Drew helps that or hinders it. And I guess that'll be one of the major storylines heading into next year.
Definitely, definitely. You guys also probably have the most expensive assistant coach in the league in Damian Lillard. And I think it was also cool for me. I was out in close to Bend, Oregon, and I saw a little kid running around in a Blazers jersey and his sister in a Blazers hoodie. And he was running around, and I was like, I got to ask him. And I said, are you excited about Dame being back? And he stopped in his tracks in the bookstore. He looked at me. He goes, he's the best player in the world, and he's my favorite. And then he ran off into the corner to find a kid's book for himself. What was that like when that news broke for you personally, and then also just kind of for those fans and the reception you kind of saw of Dame coming home?
I think it was really cool for the city. And I think it was really cool for the fan base, because obviously that was not an ideal breakup um, for the fans. So I think it's really added a lot of excitement to the team. I think it just feels right for a lot of the fans that he's back. He had such an impact beyond what he did on the court, and the way he connected with people and communities and causes. He's probably one of the best that I've seen in doing that, and connecting with the community outside of basketball. So I think it's really neat for people.
To go back quick to their new draft pick, I got to see Hansen Yang play down in Summer League. And I think one thing that you were saying, he's a great passer. One thing that stood out to me and that immediately showed me his IQ for the game was really high was just the way that he was setting screens and high screen and roll and some of the horns action that they run. He was screening guys. He was then re-screening guys and, sticking out his butt. And it just was one of those things that I immediately was like, oh my gosh, this kid knows the game and obviously has a very high IQ. What are your personal kind of expectations for the season that we may see out of him? And will he be their starting center, and just kind of what his season and his forecast might look like?
I don't know if he'll start. I think that would be a long shot if he started. I think Donovan Clingan kind of has the inside track to do that. But like you, I'm just incredibly impressed with his savvy and just his court vision. And he just has a feel for the game that is pretty unique for such a young kid. And then, he moves pretty well. His footwork is pretty solid. But one thing that concerns me is the way the NBA is playing right now. It's kind of small ball, more fluidity and running up and down the court. And the Blazers have two plotting centers in Donovan Clingan and Young. And so I don't know how that's going to translate and how they're going to be able to do that. I mean, I think Young has a little bit more fluidity than Clingan does, but it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that and work through that. And maybe other teams have to adjust to them. I don't know, but I'm going to be really curious to see. I mean, I don't know if Young plays 10 minutes a game, if he's a 20-minute a game guy. It's one thing in summer league to see him going against 6'9" guys or guys who are fringe NBA players, to, playing against real NBA centers, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic. So I'm gonna be really curious to see in NBA preseason just how he handled actual NBA centers.
Earlier, you were telling us you've gotten more into human interest stories around the NBA. What can you share with our listeners that you're working on and what they can keep an eye out from what's coming out of Jason Quick's corner?
Yeah, I'm about to embark on two attempts at features. One is Oscar Robertson, the legend. Uh, it's getting on an anniversary where I kind of want to explore. He was really at the forefront of like NBA free agency and empowering players. And I want to explore that and see how he feels about where the game is at today and just where he's at in life. I feel like he is such a legend, but we don't know that much about him and we don't have a great sense for his um what his day-to-day life is and how he feels about things. So that's one. And then another is Dick Motta. I want to check out Dick Motta. He is former coach of the Dallas Mavericks, among other teams, and he has the most wins in the NBA for a coach who's not in the Hall of Fame. And the last I heard is he's in Idaho running a bed and breakfast, does gardening. He turns 93 in September. And I just like picking the brains of highly successful people like that. And then also getting them to reflect on where they are in life and kind of like, I spent time last year with George Carl and just had a fascinating experience of getting to know him and understanding his life journey and uh, where he was, where he's at now, and how he views the game. Uh, I just love that. So those are two guys I'm hoping to um, convince, and because it's not like you call them up and say, "Hey, I want to do a story on you," and it happens. You got to convince them, and George Carl was probably the hardest or one of the more difficult subjects I had to agree to actually do it. He was like, "Okay, so tell me where you want to go with this, and how would you do it?" And it was almost like he was interviewing me first to see if he wanted to, jump in and do this. So a lot of times it's like that with these subjects. So I'm hoping to get one or both of those guys.
One last thing we'll ask here before we let you go. We usually try to get a story out of people from the Sonics days to remind people that on our social media of what the good days were like, for especially for our younger crowd. Are there any stories of being up here in Seattle or the Sonics being down in Portland that kind of stick out to you that you'd be comfortable sharing with our audience? Maybe not like a Rashard Wallace story or Rasheed Wallace, excuse me, story, but a Sonics memory that you have, Jason.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the infamous yellow Hummer story. Damon Stoudemire and Rasheed Wallace, the Blazers play up in Seattle, and uh, Maurice Cheeks gives them the okay to not go back on the team plane or the team bus, but they drive home in Damon's yellow Hummer. And in Chehalis, they get pulled over by state police. And the state police smells marijuana in the car and remnants of marijuana. So they get, uh, ticketed for that and suspended and big to do, and that was during the year where I believe it was that year where the longest the Blazers went without having a suspension, a team fine, um, uh, an arrest was 17 days. 17 days was the longest out of, and it was just a nightmare as a beat reporter. And, here I am, back then I drove up to Seattle for those games. The NBA season's a grind and cover the game, drive back, you're probably home at 2:30, and the first thing in the morning, yep, Damon and Rasheed got pulled over for weed, and it's just like, God, another thing, and it had nothing to do with basketball. So I think about that every time in Seattle, and every time I drive I-5 and go through Chehalis, I think of to Damon and Rashid and the yellow Hummer. So
You were trying to cover the offense, but they had you covering the offenses instead.
yes.
Instead. That's awesome, Jason. Well, thank you so much for your time today, man. Where can we can find your stuff on The Athletic, correct? And anything else that you want to sneak in here to plug where our audience can find you?
No, just at theathletic.com. And yeah,
Sweet.
I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate the time.